Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/wehaveways.
This season, a new hot deal has arrived at Metro. $25 a line for 4 lines with all the data you need and 4 free Samsung Galaxy A15 5G phones. Getting Metro's best deals is easy. No ID required, no activation fees. Get a new number or keep your own. It's up to you. That's 4 lines for $25 a line, plus 4 free phones. Visit a store or go online today. Only at Metro by T-Mobile.
When you join Metro Plus tax. For a limited time and subject to change. Max 1 offer per account.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
Building a portfolio with Fidelity Basket Portfolios is kind of like making a sandwich. It's as simple as picking your stocks and ETFs, sort of like your meats and other toppings, and managing it as one big, juicy investment. Now that's pretty good. Learn more at fidelity.com/baskets. Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC. Member NYSE SIPC.
Achtung! Welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk, the Second World War podcast with me, Al Murray, and James Holland. And for those of you who've been grappling with our lengthy series, this is not one of those episodes. This is
War Waffle, isn't it?
Yeah, War Waffle. Straight up, Vorwaffel, not Wehrwaffel.
Waffen Creek.
The Waffle Waffer. That's what I was groping. From the Waffle Waffer. Now, you've been on, archival and geographical adventures.
Oh my God, I had such a good week last week. So the German archives, military archives, there's various archives all over the place. But the military archives are in Freiburg, in Breslau, which is in the Schwarzwald. Yeah. Freiburg is a sort of cathedral university town, so it's very, very lovely. It's a lovely place to go and visit. There's a really good tram network, so you can...
Quite a big city. What would you say? Like a Worcester? What are we talking? A Chichester?
Yes, a Worcester Bath.
Okay.
It's very nice. It's lovely. It's got this great big cathedral in the middle, and it's got lots of little sort of cobbly, windy streets. It's got trams. It's got, it's really nice. And it was Fastnacht, which is a big thing before, the run up to Lent. Yeah. And everyone goes mad for like 6 days beforehand. They just have party night every night, and everyone wears these really outrageous costumes, and they have bar bands playing and stuff. And
sounds like a great place to visit.
It's a really great place to visit. But the archives is down in an old area which used to be the French Army of Occupation barracks.
Right, okay.
Back in the day, late 1940s, early 50s, whatever. And all these barracks have been converted into kind of really quite hip apartment blocks. Okay. And people have built sort of verandas on and put climbing plants up the outside. And it's got a slight sort of hippie vibe to the whole thing. Down in the kind of courtyards below, the sort of old Mercedes trucks, which are clearly used to be taken on hippie jaunts and things like this.
So it's a bit groovy.
It's a bit groovy.
Right.
Exactly that. And I stayed in the Hotel Elements Pure, which was a Shen Fui hotel, which to me just looked like a perfectly ordinary hotel room, just a bit more sparse than most. But anyway, so you go there, and it's quite chaotic. We got chatting to an ex-German Bundeswehr soldier who then became a war correspondent and then became obsessed with history, and back in the day met loads of people. So he met Ribbentrop's son and things like this. Yeah. But the main thing was what I was looking for was Ardennen offensive material. All Modell's papers are there.
Really?
There's files and files and files of Field Marshal Modell.
Wow.
Diaries of his wife, of documents, stuff that I sent you over a couple of things. There was a description of his character. Modell is a very dynamic kind of person. And they also had a description of his suicide by the guy who was there to witness it. It was absolutely amazing. Lots of so the area where you tend to get sort of personal accounts is called MSG. There's MSG1, there's MSG2, right. And there were quite a lot in that, including 3 separate accounts from the 277th Volks Grenadier Division. Which is really exciting. That's so those were the guys up in the north, come from the Krunkeltenwald. Yep. So they were up there, and various people. There's some 7th Army stuff. There were some others, and there was the entire file on the Führer Brigade.
Oh, what Raymer's lot?
Yeah, and including Raymer's personal diary and a personal diary of a guy called Oberleutnant Arnold. Wow. Yeah, so it's really cool. There's loads of stuff. So anyway, I was very happy about that. Then I parted company with my friend Dorothy, who lives in Bonn and who does a lot of. She's an art historian, really, and she works for Robert Edsel. Right. And I drove on up and stayed in Bad Nauheim and then went to see the Adlerhorst. And no one goes there. The Adlerhorst was a big complex. So you've got the Schloss Ziegenberg, and you go down this sort of valley. It gets narrower. There's sort of wooded slopes either side. There's a sort of valley floor, and then there's little offshoots from this valley into a kind of even narrower kind of sort of little wooded gorge kind of thing. And at the corner of the main valley and then the offshoot valley, there is a Schloss Ziegenberg, which is a sort of great big kind of white bastion with a rounded tower that looks all very kind of, Brothers Grimm. Yeah. And this was where von Rundstedt had his headquarters of OB West. Yeah. It was also where Speer in 1939 set up an advanced headquarters. Really? For Hitler. It's a network dug underneath the Schloss Ziegenberg. And it has to be said, also by the Schloss Kransberg, which is about 5 or 6 miles away, and into the side of these woods. And after the war, this whole complex was taken over by the Americans, I think, and used. And I think it was used by 5th Corps. Right. Okay. So no, I was sort of wandering around. There's no one around really. But just I didn't see a soul. I just didn't see a single person.
It's not €8 a turnstile in a gift shop, right? It's just there.
It's absolutely not. It's just there. It's private. No one knows about it. There's nothing to say, this was the Führer headquarters. There's nothing that says Adlerhorst or anything like this. Wow, anyway, you then go back down onto the kind of sort of valley floor and take the kind of offshoot valley. There on the left is this what looks like a agricultural barn covered in ivy. But
it's a great big...
It's a concrete bunker.
Great big pillbox, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
It's a great big concrete bunker with a concrete pitched roof. and it's got this sort of... It's got like a stone wall outside it, but some of it's crumbled away to reveal the Nazi concrete underneath. It's just amazing. But you can see why you'd have it as a headquarters there, because it's really hidden.
Yes.
It's very secluded, out of the way. Yeah. And I also went to Gießen, which is the train station where Hitler arrived into on the morning, 5 a.m. on the morning of the 11th of December, 1944. And the cavalcade of Mercedes was waiting for him outside. And it's completely unchanged in terms of kind of layout and everything of the main building. So I went there and kind of imagined the Führer arriving.
Wow.
Yeah. It was great. And then drove down to the Adlerhorst. And then I spent the next few days just sort of beetling around the Ardennes and doing sort of catching up on stuff that we just didn't have quite time to do the other day, and finding foxholes. And I went to the Verden Pocket, which was where the 84th rail splitters were. And I'm quite big on the rail splitters because, of course, they were with the Sherwood Rangers at Geilenkirchen in November. Yeah. I had another look around the Glaze, went to that amazing museum. Oh my God, it was good.
Yeah. Well,
you remember because it was shut when we were there.
You sent all those pictures over, like endless stuff.
Yeah. And again, it was just no one else there, so it was great. And we had a little film as well. There was a little film to watch, really? So that was quite fun. The other museum, though, do you remember J-Mac was saying that we should definitely go and see this incredible museum at Diekirch? Yes. So I went to see that. That was insane. It was so good. Quite realistic sort of dioramas of various scenarios of sort of, men huddled around in a kind of bust-up barn or whatever, and sort of, first aid post and things. And you go up these sort of stone steps and you open a door and there's this absolutely massive hangar just crammed full of stuff. I mean, you've never seen anything like it. I mean, there's literally not a spare inch anywhere.
And hardware from absolutely everything you could possibly imagine.
Everything you could possibly imagine. From, chainsaws, petrol-driven chainsaws to huge giant welding machines to medical kit to just every vehicle under the sun. Vast amounts of shells and stacks of ammunition boxes. And
wow.
And in the rafters, they've got some guys, Signal Corps guys, sort of, or engineers mending the wire.
Oh, that's cool.
I didn't notice them on my first trip around. And there was not a single person in the museums. I had the whole place to
that's
myself.
amazing.
It's just amazing.
It does make me wonder, when you say that, though, what the future of a museum like that is really, because I suppose it's February. It was March, wasn't it? It's just not the season. But, places like that, the reason I think of it is I went to Graceland about 10 years ago and it was empty. And you got the feeling, Elvis is over, or maybe
Elvis is dead.
Exactly. Elvis is finally dead. And we had the place to ourselves. Certainly had the museums the other side of the road in Memphis to ourselves.
Yes, that's right. And you get in the little minibus.
That's right. And it felt really fantastic to have the place to yourself, but it also made you think, how long has this got? With the anniversary of the end of the war, the 80th anniversary coming, and veterans passing on, you do wonder, don't you? How long has it's like the Cobberton Combat Collection, which is essentially, it's fantastic, but it's also basically, you could look at it the other way and call it a scrapyard. You know what I mean? You wonder how long these things have got now. Now it's sort of fading a bit more. Basically, whether We Have Ways listeners can keep the museums of the planet of this kind going.
I don't know. I think what you really need is you need a TV series about it, about whatever bit you want to do. Because, the interesting thing is, Dekirk is a hop and a skip from Bastogne, as we now have to call it. Bastogne. Then why wouldn't you go to Dekirk? It can't be more than 20, 30 minutes in the car. And it's, Dekirk's not a big place, easy to get into.
But that was the thing once we started touring the battlefield. What was interesting is it is a large area, but it breaks down into those sort of 5-mile hops, doesn't it? From village to village, settlement to settlement, actually. And it starts to not feel quite so enormous when you break it down like they would crumble it down a bit.
Well, yeah, and I went back to Bastogne and I had a good look around and I did some really good walking. Oh God, I had such a fantastic walk. So I thought, well, what I'll do is what's the scale of all this and why did they put these blocking? So de Zoubry sends out these 3 different blocking forces on these 3 roads. One going straight north towards Houffalize, one going east towards Bourcy, and the other one going northwest towards Vaux. So I thought, well, I'll go and walk them. That'd be fun. So I went along this track, found the kind of blocking position on the road to Bourcy. Again, you can see exactly why they'd done it because it's just on a rise, it's on the high ground coming out of, it's not a big ridge, but it's significant. You can see it's important. Then I crossed that road and I walked across a field. I found another track and I pushed on, and that's where that day, the 19th of December, what happened was the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment had moved up, and the 1st Battalion had gone to join Team de Zoubry. Right. What was he called? Lagarde, I think was the name, Major James Lagarde, and he immediately said that these were the guys who were kind of picking up weapons and stuff on their way up to Neuville. There was sort of ammo dumps and stuff of grenades and things and extra kind of coats and whatnot. And they took on the high ground to the northeast of Neuville, so between the Houffalize Road and the Bourcy Road. And again, you could see why they'd done that and why they'd gone onto this bit, because there is this quite pronounced ridge that comes out and this high ground, and the Germans were attacking from the other side. Anyway, the paratroopers got, these 1st Battalion guys got really badly mauled in this attack. But it was enough to stop the Germans in their track and they pulled back. And again, it was that crucial delaying action. Anyway, I walked on round, hit the Houffalize Road, could see why they'd done the stopping position on that, then walked into Vaux, then walked back out from Vaux to where the blocking position was just above it. And again, Vaux is in a little hollow and land rises up. So again, you kind of think, oh, that makes perfect sense. And I kind of set the old Strava and kind of thought, well, I wonder how long it'd take me to walk back into the centre of Neuville, 22 minutes. You suddenly got a sense of how it all fitted together and the scale of it and everything. So that was fascinating. And then I went into Bastogne and I went to the McAuliffe's headquarters place, which is in the old army barracks, which were built in the 1930s, then used by the Gestapo, then taken over by the Americans. And in one of the blocks in the kind of basements, there's some cellars, and that's where McAuliffe had his headquarters during a battle. But it was fascinating going there because I just wanted to sort of see what it was like and how they've done it. It's very much the kind of sort of the awful sacrifice, the terrors of war, this sort of stuff. You are now going down into the cellars of McAuliffe's headquarters here in Bastogne. It was all this kind of stuff, and you go down and the kind of lights flicker and And you hear sort of, the sort of audio of sort of, chit chat and scraping of chairs and little dioramas of people sort of going, God, do you think we'll get out? We'll ever see another Christmas?
Really?
I thought it was beautifully put together, but I thought the commentary in the audio was just absolutely just awful and just unspeakably mawkish. But obviously, it's not directed to me. You had an audio tour with, with your headphones and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I went around the whole thing in 9 minutes. I think you're supposed to be there for 3 hours.
Unbelievable.
But then I went into the 101st Airborne Museum, which is in this house, and it's absolutely tremendous. It's got this incredible basement, which is a bomb shelter, and you just push the door and go to the bomb shelter, sit in the bomb shelter, and first of all you hear sort of, like sort of, bitter winter wind, and you're already sort of starting to kind of shuffle your shoulders just out of sort of sympathy. Lights flicker, and there's a kind of, through a sort of shattered window, you can see a sort of a room with some Belgian civilians sort of looking chilly and kind of worried. Suddenly you hear this sort of, the drone of aircraft and bombs falling, and the sort of clack, clack, clack of tanks and machine guns, and everything shakes, and the lamp above you starts flickering and moving around and stuff. It was absolutely brilliant. Yeah. It was completely fantastic. And then there was this other diorama of these Americans going into this room and attacking these Germans, and one of the Germans is very badly wounded. The other one's getting stabbed in the stomach with a bayonet, sort of pulling a face, and there's a stain in his shirt.
They've really gone for it there
They've gone for it big time. But my point I was going to say, this is the whole point of saying all this, in the McAuliffe's basement in Bastogne and also the 101st Airborne Museum, there were loads of people. Bastogne was heaving.
Well, that's good.
But Dekirk, not a soul. Frankly, much better museum.
Yeah. Well, it's strange, isn't it?
Although it did, it didn't have people being stabbed.
But it's the complete distortion, isn't it? Via the movies and the telly, isn't it? Of where the centre of gravity in the story is, really.
Unbelievable. Yeah, because there's so much cool stuff to
then
see.
Even in our 8 parts, we didn't talk about the second phase of the battle, really, where the Americans crushed the Germans back into position, do they? I mean, we didn't...
No, we paid a lip
service. Because although it's like and John, we talked about this with J-Mac, that's the hard slog bit. There's none of the sort of thrill of the German breakout and jeopardy, as it were, of the German breakout.
And 6th Airborne, who we didn't even mention.
I know. Yeah, well, Dad sent over that the Ox and Bucks war diary, didn't he, for us to look at? Yeah. I mean, I thought the stuff you sent over was really, really brilliant. That thing about Dietrich is really, really funny.
Yeah.
General Dietrich is regarded with low esteem by his fellow officers. He did not seem to have a grasp of the operations of his army in the Ardennes and was unable to present a comprehensive picture of the happenings, even in the most general terms. Much of the material in the following pages must be regarded in the light of this situation. Furthermore, there are numerous obvious errors in the answers provided by this former chauffeur.
I know.
I mean, that's just
fantastic,
amazing, isn't it?
About how damning is it? But there's also quite a lot of stuff on Kramer, which is quite good.
Yeah. Well, should we take a break and then with some questions too, in the style of
And I must tell you about my strange encounter in a hospital waiting room as well.
Yes, please do. We will see you in a tick.
This episode is brought to you by 20th Century Studios' The Amateur. When his wife is murdered, Charlie Heller, the CIA's most brilliant computer analyst, must trek across the globe and use his only weapon, his intelligence, to hunt down her killers and enact revenge. Starring Academy Award winner Rami Malek and Academy Award nominee Lawrence Fishburne. The Amateur. Rated PG-13. Only in theaters April 11th.
This episode is brought to you by the Toyota Grand Highlander. From daily routines to life-changing adventures, the Toyota Grand Highlander is spacious, powerful, and ready to take on life's grand challenges. Advanced safety features and innovative technology give you confidence for whatever life throws at you. And it's available in a hybrid Nightshade Special Edition, which includes sophisticated gloss black exterior accents and 20-inch black alloy wheels. Learn more at toyota.com/Grand Highlander. Toyota, let's go places.
Are you still quoting 30-year-old movies? Have you said cool beans in the past 90 days? Do you think Discover isn't widely accepted? If this sounds like you're stuck in the past. Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. And every time you make a purchase with your card, you automatically earn cash back. Welcome to the now. It pays to Discover. Learn more at discover.com/credit card. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen Report.
Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Waffle.
Waffle
The Waffle Waffer, James Holland and me, Al Murray. Now, Jim, we bumped into each other yesterday, actually, at the Goalhanger event, didn't we? Which was
great fun, wasn't it?
Great fun, and really interesting to me.
Sat next to the brilliant Catty Kay, sat opposite Gary, which is fantastic.
I was sat next to David Olusoga, who was telling me he's doing
He's so nice.
He's such a nice bloke, but his next lecture series that he's going to take out is about the social history of the machine gun.
What?
Yeah, because he said, I'll be honest with you, I came into history via I started off with the Second World War, and then I became a historian, and I'm trying to claw my way back.
What did you say? You can run, but you
exactly.
can't hide.
But and he was very interesting about the marketing around the Tommy gun. The Tommy gun, basically, the marketing around it in the 1920s is all about for bandits, basically, essentially to the mob.
They knew who their core audience was.
And then it's basically this is a gun for getting bandits. It's how they market it back to the cops or whatever. Once the war starts, the US audience going, this gun's too expensive, it's too heavy. You need to get the price down, blah, blah, blah. And they get into a tussle about it. And that's how you end up with the grease gun.
Amazing.
Because the US audience are like, we're spending too much money on this. Absolutely fascinating.
How amazing.
Yeah. And then I got a hard yes from Dominic Sandbrook about coming to We Have Ways Fest.
Yes.
He's very excited about that prospect, actually, talking about the politics. I had a really good chat with him about that. He was very much up for it. And I think his son is fascinated by the subject as well. So he'll score some brownie points too. He said he loves tanks.
Well, he's going to do Churchill on that.
Yeah. But it was very sweet as well to see the original four, because now Goalhanger's this sort of extraordinary.
But no Joey.
Like no Joey yesterday. Like a beehive now. There's that photo of the four of them.
What, Tony's the queen bee.
Yeah, exactly. But of Tony and Harry and Joey and John in their jump jackets that we bought them all those years ago when we first got going.
Yes.
Looking very, very pleased with themselves. Anyway, you told me this absolutely amazing thing yesterday that to be honest, it was completely amazing, but also in its own strange way, not at all surprising.
So background to story is when we were in the Bulge, I woke up one morning with a really, really sore neck, which hasn't gone away. And it turns out, so I was in the hospital having an MRI scan on my neck. Turns out I've got a herniated disc in my neck, and it's really bad. Anyway, so I was in the waiting room. This chap, this sort of I don't know, he's probably in his 70s, late 60s, 70s, something like that. He said, "Oh, you James Holland?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Oh, I've read your books and blah, blah, blah." I said, "Oh, thank you very much." Anyway, we got chatting. He said, "Oh, what are you up to at the moment?" I said, "Well, I'm doing sort of Bulge stuff." He said, I was in the Scots Guards, and he said, I went in a BOAR battlefield tour of the Ardennes in 1972. And I said, amazing. He said, yes, we had a curious German fellow with us, a chap called Joachim Peiper. I literally nearly fell off my chair.
Amazing.
I mean, what? He said, yes. I said, what? Joachim Peiper, as in Waffen-SS Kampfgruber, as in Joachim Peiper. Yeah. And he said, yes. I said, what was he like? He said, well, his English was superb. Very good. Totally unrepentant. Said that the Malmedy accident, he had nothing to do with him whatsoever. I said, but was he all right? I mean, was he a good bloke or whatever? And he said, well, he said he was very interesting. That was absolutely amazing.
That is absolutely incredible.
We got chatting a bit more about it. I said, how on earth did you get Joachim Peiper, Waffen-SS war criminal to come on this? He said, well, I don't think it'll ever happen again. He said, I think quite a few knuckles were wrapped on that one.
God, it's just amazing.
I know, but I really want to find the documents that went with it.
Well, they'll be out there somewhere, won't they? I mean, Sandhurst probably, or even. I mean, they may even. I don't know. Where would they be?
I don't know.
But then when you go, fast forward to the 1980s. Hans von Luck is on, Goodwood staff rights, isn't he? He became.
Oh well, he mentioned that. He said, well, Hans Luck was a sort of safer bet, and he said, I think that with every one the tales got better and and so on.
Yeah.
Conversations you have in hospital waiting rooms.
Well, absolutely.
I mean, but I was almost quite grateful for my MRI scan for that, for that little nugget.
Yeah, well, the thing is, the shock of it, you might have popped another disc, though. That's the only thing.
That's a worry.
Peiper was murdered, wasn't he? He moved to France.
Murdered in 1976. Yes, so this is the other thing that I think he was called John Targills was his name. And John said, yes, he said, the thing I can't understand is why on earth he was living in France. Yeah. I said, I think he just liked it. I think he wanted to sort of the quiet life. I mean, he ended up translating for Mercedes, didn't he, and Porsche.
Yeah.
Translating technical manuals. I mean, from commanding sort of 5,000 men and 115 tanks and 800 vehicles, age 29, to translating technical manuals for Porsche. And, it's a bit of a.
Well, yeah, but maybe he was better at the technical manuals than he was at commanding. I mean, he didn't do a gleaming job, did he? I mean, he was given something terrible to do, but
anyway, he was murdered. Basically the postman changed.
That's right.
In his little village in Provence. It was called something like Sèvres or something like that, or Troyes, Troyes, something like that. Anyway, wherever he was, he lived, and he lived in this. He lived in these woods, and he had quite a simple kind of old stone building, and it was just a little place he could call home, not think too much about his war crimes. And he had kids, didn't he? And his wife and stuff. His wife stood by him. She's probably a Nazi as well, I don't know. But anyway, he the postman changed, and the new postman was a communist and worked out who he was. And they started a sort of hate campaign. They started daubing stuff on walls in the village. Wow. And then on the main road, someone just wrote, Peiper, war criminal or whatever, on the road in big paint. And he started getting, anonymous letters and stuff. Wow. And then one night, a whole bunch of them attacked him with kind of Molotov cocktails, chucking them through the glass and whatever. And I think he'd have been okay had he not tried to save his papers and stuff. But there were loads of stories about, four French communists were murdered, and when they discovered his body, he had a gun by his side and empty cartridges, and he'd taken them down with him and all this sort of stuff, all of which is just complete lie. Nothing didn't happen at all.
Wow. He wouldn't have done an American staff ride, would he? That's the thing. He'd have said yes to a PAOR staff ride, wouldn't he? But he's not going to be able to. Well, yeah, and then he could have told them how it really was, and it would have been his chance to get his word across, and he could dazzle them with his English and talk about the old days where he was actually really important and much more important than any of them. Yeah, God, amazing, isn't it? Should we do some questions? We've got some quite interesting ones. This is actually something I've often sort of scratched my head wondering about. Trevor asks, given Spain, Switzerland and Sweden were neutral, was there much in the way of civil aviation through the skies in Europe, 39 to 45? And if so, how did it work in terms of who was allowed to fly? Assume Mrs. Miggin's flying to Madrid may have been looked at askance. And how would they avoid being shot down?
Well, the truth is they didn't always avoid getting shot down. I reference General Sikorsky, who was shot down, Leslie Howard, who was shot down over the Bay of Biscay and killed. So lots of people did. I mean, that was the whole point of having rondels and markings, was to do this. So people did. There was a lot of flying around. Churchill and Roosevelt and stuff were flying, and you had to do so with a huge amount of care and caution. It was very, very fraught. Harold Macmillan crashing on takeoff and having to rescue the French pilot.
That's not civil aviation as such, is it? I think
no, it's not. So it's not as such,
male, isn't it?
But there was a lot of flying. So civil aviation in Switzerland and stuff. Yes, within Switzerland you can fly. Yes, yes, it did happen, and ditto quite a lot in Sweden. There was no issue about it at all. If you're flying over Sweden and you Swedish markings, you're sort of okay. But obviously, there's not a lot of commercial flying because there's no reason to. There wasn't much commercial flying then anyway. Fuel was expensive. It was fraught with risk on so many levels, so there wasn't a lot. But it did happen, but not very much.
Diplomatic bag back from Sweden and that sort of thing, isn't it? In mosquitoes, it's that sort of stuff.
It's all that kind of stuff.
And
there's lots of people flying in and out of Lisbon.
Yeah.
Spy capital of Europe, etc.
I mean, it is important. I mean, we've talked about this before. We've touched on it before in the podcast. Flying is different then to it is now. It's much, much more dangerous, full stop.
Yes.
It is still novel. There are there are internal airlines in the US, aren't there, which is where a lot of transport pilots come from. You sort of got to unimagine the world as it is now, haven't you, to think about aviation in the 1940s.
Well, just think of all the people that were killed. What's his name? Mulders is killed in a flying accident. General Wever is killed in a flying accident.
Yeah. Bertram Ramsey.
Fritz Todd is killed in a flying accident. Bertram Ramsey is killed in a flying accident. The aforementioned Leslie Howard, the film star, is shot down over the Bay of
Ord
Biscay.
Wingate.
Mary Cunningham is killed just after the war in the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah.
So it happens a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, every time you fly. I mean, this is why really the Yalta conference at that end of the war is just astonishing that they did that.
Yeah.
And again, I'm afraid that's the Russians sort of going, well, you've got to come to us.
But that's the Russians wanting to be in charge, isn't it? And making.
Yeah. But I find it absolutely incredible that they did. Roosevelt ill, really, really ill, traveling all the way from the US to the Black Sea.
It is truly extraordinary.
It comes with all sorts of kind of risk.
Yeah. Well, and not least, he's not very well. It kind of kills him, doesn't it? Really?
Yeah, it does kill him,
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Around now, I mean, we have these questions, but we've also got a little summary of what's happening now in March 1945, which I think is really interesting. So this is Hitler's last visit to the front is on March the 11th. It goes to Bad Frauenwalde on the Oder. And of course, says the Wonder Weapons, if you could just hold on, the Wonder Weapons are on offer and they will be ready. Don't worry. I mean, imagine, does he believe it?
Does he?
No, he can't, can he?
No.
I mean, the thing is
no, he knows. He
he can look at a map,
but he's refusing. But he's also sort of refusing to admit it to himself.
Yeah. I mean, he can look at a map as well as anyone else, can't he? He can see where the front lines have fallen to. I mean, this is a thing I didn't know about. Santa Fe riots on the 12th of March. Japanese internment camp prisoners are wounded by Border Patrol agents using tear gas and batons.
Or is that the 7 Japanese prisoners that have been captured in the war?
No, it's just people who've been interned. So
they're interned, so they're not.
Yeah. No, you've the Battle of Kianuleskis, which is Lithuanians, partisans holding out against the Red Army against conscription and occupation. So there's a taste of the actual feeling in the Baltic about the Soviet Union and about the Russians.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting one. 16th of March is FDR, Roosevelt, asked American people to tighten their belts as a matter of decency so the US could send more food to war-ravaged Europe and stuff. And really, I had such an interesting conversation with Katty Kay yesterday. Yeah. We were talking about this, and I was talking about all the things that Roosevelt had done, the sort of executive presidential orders, the changing of, removing of a whole load of responsibility for rearmament from the hands of Congress into his own personal hands. And she was saying, well, yes, so is that so very different from Trump? And I said, well, it's 2 big differences. The first thing is that Roosevelt, for all his Machiavellianism, was fundamentally a really good man who absolutely believed in world peace and world prosperity and wanted to create a world free of fear and want, as per the Atlantic Charter of August 1941, etc. Trump isn't. You can be a MAGA supporter, you can think the sun shines out of his arse, but he is a completely selfish, narcissistic individual. There's no question about that. It's completely different, and there is a mission. America, United States in the 1940s is clearly imperfect. You have Jim Crow laws and all the rest of it, and racism, all of that. But it is on a mission for global betterment, and it wants to be the beacon of that betterment. It is on that path. And Roosevelt is very much championing that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting him talking about tightening belts because, I mean, send more food to war-ravaged nations, because this is one of the big things in Lend-Lease. The butter going to the Soviet Union. Butter and crab going to the Soviet Union. There's actually a butter shortage in the US as a result of Lend-Lease because they're sending so much butter east, to the Soviets. To the point where you've questions asked in Congress about it because American families are saying, well, hold on a minute, why are we going short on butter? And, and you've got pork. In 1943, the American pork canning industry, spam industries, is jigged to deal with the Soviet demand for canned meat. So it's not surprising that, in early 1945, in the first quarter of 1945, FDR's saying this. This is carrying on. We're going to have, and also, Okinawa, April is
1st of April,
exactly.
April Fool's Day.
And if your eye is turning to the Pacific now, as the Americans inevitably must be, once you're over the Rhine, you're thinking, well, there's maybe another year and a half of this, maybe another year and a half of sending butter to the Soviets or whatever. Before you even get into doing a blood drive for the invasion of the Japanese mainland.
I like this question from Jan, who says, with the 80 years of VE victory in Europe commemoration this year in mind, do you think the current war in Ukraine will somehow affect the historiography of World War II? Well, you've been talking about this to me the other day. Yes,
absolutely. And in lots of different directions, isn't it? Because I think Woody and I talked about this, that one of the changes...
Woody Woodage.
Yeah, Woody Woodage, who does the World War II TV channel. One of the things that's definitely happened is because the Russians performed so sort of, well, not badly, but beneath the expectations that they had sought to project. People talked about the Russian army, the current Russian army, being the second, army in the world after the US army before the invasion of Ukraine. And now I don't think anyone thinks that. And
no, everyone thinks that.
No, and all the jokes about they're the second best army in Ukraine, that sort of stuff. I think we were just talking about Lend-Lease, and I think, Sean McMeekin's book, which states without Lend-Lease, the Soviet Union will have got nowhere in the Second World War. There are jeeps in Stalingrad within a year of the Americans.
Yes, well, I don't remember when Chukov turns up.
Within a year of entering the war, the Americans entering the war.
Amazing.
And it's amazing because it's quite interesting because Adam II's were
480,000 miles of
that's it. Wire. Yes, and locomotives and tube alloys in the end. And before this, Adam II's had kind of argued that the Soviet Union was able to win its part of the Second World War because it had industrialized, because it had had its revolution. Whereas the Germans are essentially, they're putting their revolution off until after the war, that's when they'll sort things out. They need to get the war done now. And so he argues, that the Soviets are able to win and because of the revolution, because II's is left-leaning, one way or another.
Yeah.
But now you look at it and you think, well, it's American stuff, but that might also be because the prism of the Ukraine war is American stuff has kept Ukraine going. So we're seeing another version of Lend-Lease, another way of looking at the effect of...
Well, I think the main thing is it makes you slightly think again that despite the kind of revolution that takes place in the kind of second half of 1942, the sort of growth of professionalism within the Red Army, which I suppose it reaches a high watermark at Kursk under Rokossovsky and co. This development of the deep battle, but the deep battle is spectacularly wasteful. So for those who don't know, and we have talked about it in the past, but the idea of the deep battle is what you do is you have this incredible build-up of forces, and that your echelons, you basically swing back this huge battering ram of your kind of assault divisions, but the echelons come through with you. So you just go in this huge, great surge, this sort of tidal wave of violence. The problem is that
it's like a monocellular organism that the army travels with everything in it.
Everything in it.
You know those pictures of a cell that you draw for GCSE or O-level biology, where there's the cell with all the parts in it. The army moves as a sort of contiguous blob with everything in it that it needs.
But the problem with that is that it's incredibly wasteful.
Yeah.
Because and the truth is that the speed with which they're developing these new divisions is so fast that they can't possibly be trained. There's none of this kind of sort of 2 years training in Northern Ireland that you had before D-Day or anything like that. These guys are sort of, they're given basic training. They are considered entirely expendable, and they are.
Well, Pokrovka, you talk about Kursk and Rokossovsky's Operation Laugh. Pokrovka that is an absolute disaster if you're a Soviet tanker, but they still win.
Yeah.
I mean,
So they use overwhelming violence and power and numbers to do the hard yards, but it's incredibly wasteful. And I think what you're seeing with the Russian army in Ukraine is one that is also incredibly wasteful, incredibly kind of callous and cruel with regard to the lives of their own men. They just don't care. They're expecting, high attrition. And you also see a sort of lack of coordination and lack of decent training. And, that's what happens when you're burning through a lot of people very, very quickly, because you haven't got time to train them.
It's funny, when we've been to the Ardennes, I was talking to Andy Aitchison about this, a 52nd Lowland Division specialist listener of ours, fantastic bloke, ex-sapper, so clearly right sort of person. And he was saying,
obviously,
here's one at a glance takeaway from the Bulge is operational art is much easier in the east than it is in the west to fill the Germans. If you bring, because a lot of the people who are fighting on the German side in the Ardennes are used to fighting on the Eastern Front with lots of Eastern Front experience. They come west. It's just that much more difficult. The West of...
Because of the terrain, but also because they're up against the Americans who are good.
And because of, tactical air they're conjoined twins. There's the way Phillips, Pace and O'Brien describes the Battle of the Bulge. There's this small land kerfuffle, and then the actual battle begins, which is the big aerial component. There's the pause when no one can use their aircraft, and then the aircraft show up, and then that's that, really. And I think there's an interesting point. The operational side of things is that much easier if you're the Germans fighting the Soviets. You're still being absolutely smashed to pieces by these gigantic armies, but it's still you can still make ground if you need to on the Eastern Front in a way that on the Western Front it's just a different ball game operationally. I mean, I think the other thing we're going to see, to come back to the question about historiography of the surrenders and everything, is the Russian approach to negotiation, which is a completely maximalist demand and no bending.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
By the time this comes out, it might
have happened, yeah. But whatever's going to happen, there's this ceasefire that means that, an end to the war can be credited. But I don't think it's completely, it feels to me like completely unfinished business in the East, in Ukraine. I mean, whatever happens in the next 6 weeks. Anyway, should we do one last question? Denny, I like this. My question is, how on earth was anything even running in Germany in late 1945? I mean...
what was life like in Berlin? It was rough. It
terrible.
Was awful.
Awful.
It was terrible.
Everything's bad. Everything indicates
you're making ends meet by not very much. Dependent on dole-outs by the Allies and I mean, cities in ruins. I mean, it's just absolute ruins. Or it's just everything's gone to pot.
Yeah. And you will have lost someone. So everyone's in a state.
Does he mean late 1945?
I think he means late 1944. But I mean.
Well, if he does mean late 1944, the real collapse happens in February 1945 because that's when the Reichsbahn ceases to exist properly,
and everything falls in.
It's been so hammered that they can't function anymore, and the Reichsbahn is very much the glue that keeps everything together.
I mean, there is this thing as well. The whole country would have been in grief. Everyone will have lost someone, so everyone is dealing with grief. Imagine what an emotional or suppressed emotionally place it must have been.
Absolutely, just unbelievable.
Right. Well, thanks very much for listening. We've got stuff to come at the end of the war in Europe. We've got to look at.
New mega series.
A new mega series.
Working on that.
We'll be looking further into the year. Visions of Pete.
Bridge at Remagen. God, that's a great story.
I interviewed the bloke whose dad had been the station master who they shot, who they thought was in the SS because he was wearing a black railway uniform. Poor sod. And then an American soldier who said, "We shot this SS guy." And it's like, oh no.
I don't know why I'm laughing.
It's horrible ironies of maybe shit. We got Hiroshima, the beginning of the atomic age, the Nuremberg trials, hopefully. And, some point we'll get round to some of the other years of the Second World War. Members, of course, get early and ad-free access to all series if you become an officer class member on our Apple channel or become a We Have Ways of Making You Talk Patreon. We have some events, not the dim and distant, but in September, of course, from the 12th to the 14th is We Have Ways Festival V for Victory, putting the fun into funf. On the 12th of April, so we have Fighting for Finley, which is a wargaming event in Chiswick in West London, where on that Saturday we'll be fighting Nijmegen and Arnhem on big tables. Try and end the war before Christmas is the idea, isn't it, Jim? See if we can do that.
Yeah, something like that.
And if you missed it, we have a member-exclusive live stream in March talking about morale and psychology in the war with John McManus and Dr. Luke Hughes, which was just an absolutely fantastic thing
wasn't it
chat to
fantastic?
talk.
Yeah.
Really, really fascinating.
Yeah, really, really interesting.
Burden of command.
Very thought-provoking.
Really thought-provoking. Anyway, we will see you all soon. Thanks very much for listening, and cheerio.
Cheerio.